Our next talk is going to be by Andrej Shadura. Andrej Shadura. Pristine-lfs, a robust replacement for pristine-tar using Git LFS. The floor is yours.
Hello, welcome to my talk. My name is Andrej, and I'm going to talk to you about the tool I wrote as a replacement for pristine-tar called pristine-lfs. So I'm going to talk first about a bit of a history of this talk and why it was created. So I work for Collabora, and at Collabora we develop a Debian derivative called Apertis that is mostly targeting automotive and embedded users. It's based on Debian. Previously it was used on it was based on Ubuntu, but at some point we switched to Debian as a direct source. And since about 2019, we managed to move all of the packages of this distribution directly into Git. So the packages are stored in Git themselves. They are built using OBS, and there is a special GitLab machinery, GitLab CI machinery that transfers them from Git into the OBS. So this complicated machinery is necessary because OBS, which is in full it's open build service, or previously open SUSE build service. It's a tool which allows basically managing source packages and building them for multiple distributions, but it doesn't have a really good version control. So it's a really good build tool. It allows creating packages for multiple distributions at once. It tracks dependencies and other things. It has a user interface, web interface for uploading packages and reviewing requests and other things, but it's not very user-friendly. So it's well suited for Red Hat-based distributions because the normal workflow is to have a spec file and tarballs and things, but it doesn't really work well with Debian source packages. And you can see that on this screenshot where I've uploaded multiple versions of the same package, and instead of a proper Debian diff, it shows me just changes in the DSC file, just hash sums and things. Sometimes it unpacks the Debian diff files or Debian tarballs, but it's far from perfect, and it's very difficult to review changes in this way. So changing to proper Git-based workflows improved the review process significantly. To put things into Git, we used a modified deb14 which is supported. What?
Keep going.
Supported by Git build package. The initial idea was to store tarballs with pristine-tar because that was the golden standard at Debian at the time, and we'd use OBS just to build packages instead of having everything in there. Basically, more or less, this is how it works. This deb14, and this is the augmented deb14 with Apertis changes on top of it. So we started importing all of the distribution into Git with pristine-tar as the way to store tarballs, and we quickly ran into that sort of problems when just some things could not be either committed or checked out. In this case, you see the tarball was using XZ, and pristine-tar failed to create the delta, the binary delta for this package, for this tarball. In this case, it failed to check out even a zip file. And there were not very many of those problems, but they were frequent enough to make us look for some other solution. Sometimes the files would check out perfectly, but they would not match the original file. I think that probably was an issue with the workflow because that shouldn't happen with pristine-tar. So probably the files were somehow damaged in transfer, but nevertheless, the issues when the files wouldn't commit or check out were very frequent, and we wanted to look for something different. So why this happens? This happens because pristine-tar basically is trying to solve a problem. So the problem with tarballs is that they are, so first of all, it's this unpacked source, which has to match some Git tree, and then it's compressed with one of the compressors we have, which is zip, zip2, exec, and so on. So recreating the tar itself, the tarball, is relatively easy because we have a Git tree. We just serialize it. Sometimes the files come out in the wrong order. It's relatively easy to solve with binary deltas and so on. But then it has to be compressed, and compressors change over the time, and they are not always reproducible. So pristine-tar has to have the implementations for every single compressor ever used for Debian packages, and it has to reproduce them perfectly, and then it has to solve the difference somehow. So for this purpose, pristine-tar ships a very old version of bzip2 from SUSE. It also ships parts of a different version of bzip2, and also, as it says in the man page, it ships a zlib-based gzip that is heavily based on netbsd gzip. And also it ships this thing that's called Frankenstein's compressor, which is an unholy combination of multiple gzip programs, and you're not supposed to use it ever in your life unless you are the developer of pristine-tar. So this causes all sorts of issues, and while it can be made to work, it's not 100% bulletproof. And then exec comes to the stage, and exec is inherently not reproducible, and that's why there was this one developer who was really angry about exec not being reproducible, and he created an alternative to it, which GNU tried to promote, lzip, but because it's almost the same thing as exec, no one really wanted to use that alternative compressor, but nevertheless, exec has this problem. So eventually, we came up with a solution that we actually don't want to store the contents of the tarballs directly in Git, and we just store them somewhere next to Git, just as they are, bit for bit. And that was Git LFS, because the Git LFS integrates with Git. It has a binary blob storage inside of the Git repository, but not in the one of the Git structures. It's just another directory inside of .git. It is supported by all major Git forges, which are like GitHub, GitLab. I think Gitolite probably supports as well. It can be easily added to any of the Git forges if necessary, because it's a very simple protocol. It can be re-implemented if necessary. There's one major implementation in Go, but also multiple client implementations in Python, for example. So that's how pristine-lfs was born. It sees a tool that has the same command line interface as pristine-tar, but instead of creating the binary deltas, it leverages Git LFS inside. It was written in Python instead of Perl because, well, I just speak Python better than Perl. I did not re-implement Git LFS itself because it was easy to just call to the external tool from Python. And actually, I haven't updated this number here. It's been tested not by 2 years in production, but already, 5 probably, actually. So this is how pristine-lfs stores tarballs. As I mentioned, there's a binary storage inside of the Git directory. The binary files are stored there in a file which matches the hash of the file. It's SHA-256. And inside of the repository itself, there is a text file called a pointer, which mentions the hash file, the size of the hash of the file, the size of the file, and the version of the protocol. Git attributes mechanism is used to tell Git that it needs to actually call to Git LFS and replace those pointer files with the actual binaries from the storage. So the idea is that it is possible to check out the branch on which tarballs are stored in this way, and Git LFS will automatically fetch the necessary objects and make them look like actual files in the directory. Or this pristine-lfs tool can be used to selectively download and check out only the files needed for the operation. So the command line interface made to be intentionally almost the same as the pristine-tar command line interface. So this is the pristine-tar, how it looks like, and this is pristine-lfs. So this removes the commands that are not necessary, the low-level commands generate delta, generate tar. Actually, the command verify is mentioned as being absent in this one, but actually I added it meanwhile because it's still useful to check if the tarball actually matches what's on the branch. And there's also a command to automate the import process, which is import DSC. Just give it a DSC file, and it imports all of the tarballs mentioned in that one. So this is how you use it. You can be on the branch with the Debian packaging. If you use the author command line option, it will automatically check the Debian changelog, find the last entry in it, and if there is tarball matching that version in the pristine-lfs branch, it checks it out. The same way you can import tarballs for the package just by giving the DSC file, or you can actually import the whole of the source package. I will explain later why this is useful. So if you give it -- full, it will also import the Debian tarball and the DSC file into the branch you tell it to import it to. So this -- full is useful for example, for backporting. So, for example, in Apertus, we use sometimes we want to backport a version from one distribution to the previous release, and we want multiple distributions to share the package pool. For that to happen, we need to have the same bit-by-bit matching tarballs and Debian tarballs and other files. So the same machinery, once it's built the package once with this exact Debian revision, it puts it on a special branch with the DSC file and the Debian tarball as well. And when someone wants to upload this to another distribution, it checks this branch and it finds DSC files there already. And instead of generating them from scratch, which can change the hashes of the files, it just creates those files out of the Git LFS branch. So the source package is the same across different branches, and only the binary packages get rebuilt. So this is more or less how it looks like. We just have a branch with tarballs and the normal Git build package compatible branches next to them. And the same machinery it generates the source packages from the Git branches and checks out the tarball from pristine-lfs and uploads it to OBS, where packages get built normally. And this is how this is the backporting process I explained previously. You can see the pristine-lfs source branch has those full source packages, including the tarballs and Debian things, and they all share the tarballs stored in the Git LFS storage. So pristine-lfs can be used in Debian as well, and I use it myself. I don't know how many other people use it, in fact, by this day. But it's really easy because Salsa supports Git LFS already because it's GitLab. I think Git LFS is enabled by default in new projects created on Salsa. But if not, it's just one checkbox away from being enabled. Obviously, with Git LFS, you cannot do your work completely offline. If you just check out if you just clone the repository, you need to actually download the objects, the tarballs you're going to work with. It can be done with, I think, Git LFS pool or something. There's a command to download all of the tarballs, all of the objects mentioned on the specific branch, or you can just check out the pristine-lfs branch, at which point all of the tarballs on that branch will be downloaded, and then you can go fully offline and you can work with it just as if it was pristine-tar. But unless you do that, you cannot work fully offline. At the moment, there is no Git build package integration in the master branch of Git build package. There is a pending merge request, which requires some more polishing, but it's mostly working. So if you want to test it, you can actually check out that merge request and build it. And as I said, it mostly works. It's just some configuration options we need to finalize. Or you can just use pristine-tar or pristine-lfs as pristine-tar if you use it manually. You're welcome to join the development team if you like, and that's the Git repository, the URL of the Git repository on Salsa. And that's it. Thank you. Questions? Answers?
So thank you very much for that. I was wondering about the problems with pristine-tar. How many of those were caused by using a SUSE tool chain, or is that also on Debian?
SUSE tool, what do you mean by SUSE tool chain?
By using the OBS stuff.
OBS was not related to this at all, because OBS at this point didn't even come into question.
Okay.
OBS is only used to build the packages, and well, the upstream is not always. They are not interested in Debian packages as such. It's just like a byproduct for them, basically. But we actually use a patched OBS with better support for Debian packages. But it's not even related to this case, because this was only about storing the source packages in Git. And only late in the stage, when we actually create source packages out of Git, OBS comes into play. But so back in the day, we were using OBS to store the packages themselves, actually, and that's what we wanted to avoid, and that's why all of this was invented, so that we don't use OBS to actually store the packages, and we don't depend on them.
Thanks. I will definitely see to move my stuff into LFS as well, and also see if the org target set tool from DevScripts that I wrote some decade ago or something will get support for auto-detecting that.
Can you please repeat? I did not.
So in DevScripts, there's a script called org target gz, which goes looking for various locations where to fetch a tarball, and pristine-lfs should, of course, be one of those.
It is supported there already.
Okay, so someone was faster than me there. So yep. Thanks for that.
Hi, thanks for your presentation. I am one of the maintainers of pristine-tar, and I think we should probably transition the entire project to use pristine-lfs instead, because pristine-tar is not sustainable in the long term. Mm-hmm. How do you see that happening?
What sort of transition do you mean?
Well, people should stop using pristine-tar. I mean, I still use it every day because I'm lazy, but I should bite the bullet and just switch.
Well, I guess the first step would be for me to complete the merge request for GBP. So as I said, it's like all of the stuff is already implemented there. What's left is a bit of bike shedding about the configuration, because the idea was to allow people, if they want to use pristine-tar, to continue using pristine-tar, and at the same time make it easy for them to use pristine-lfs. And that's where this has to be sort of, this needs to be decided how exactly this configuration can be done. Because obviously we will find people who will say, no, I want to stay with pristine-tar and nothing else works for me. And we want to make those people also happy. And that's where this merge request was told, because like it needs to be implemented, some sort of strategy. But yeah, but when this is ready, when GBP supports pristine-lfs natively, using it will be very easy. There's no easy way to convert pristine-tar to pristine-lfs right now. Probably can add an option or like another subcommand to pristine-lfs to import things from pristine-tar branch or something. Or maybe we should just have pristine-tar as a fallback and continue with new tarballs and pristine-lfs. I don't know which one is better.
Yeah, for sure, I think having GBP try one first and then the other is going to be useful, because then you don't really have to convert everything, but having the option to import is also good. I think as many tools as we can provide for people to switch, it would be useful.
That was one of my ideas. So that so GBP can default. It can have two sets of settings. It already has like separate sections in the GBP conf, so it can probably have on import. It would import by default to pristine-lfs unless it's told to import things into pristine-tar. And on export, it would try them in the priority order. From first try Git LFS and then try pristine-tar. And if nothing helps, then it just complains. So maybe that's a way to go.
Is there any other questions?
First of all, I want to thank you all your work for the pristine-lfs. Actually, you mentioned some problems with the pristine-tar, and I personally had the same problem previously. I guess it was because I used the very old distribution. It was, I think, is Stretch. Mm-hmm. And after I upgrade some packages, sorry, I forgot it. Maybe upgrade the pristine-tar, maybe some other dependencies such as Delta 3, upgrade to the backport version, and it worked as normal. So I guess it's not a problem of the pristine-tar itself. Maybe just some need to new libraries. It's ABI breakage. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what the experience I want to share. Thank you.
Yeah, just wanted to say that breakage with pristine-tar is something that may happen at any point in the future when, for example, I don't know, XZ can change the format once again slightly, or gzip, very unlikely, but still, like, I don't know, pristine-tar, does it support ZST? Probably not at all. Or, I mean, those things can change over the time, and then we get some breakage again. So it's like never-ending story.
Just to add to that, pristine-tar sometimes breaks when tar changes as well. So there was we have to carry a tar patch forever in Debian. So the Debian tar package has a patch there to make things work for pristine-tar, because at some point tar changed the behavior or how it produces tarballs, and then it broke every single tarball. And we have to update that patch to rebase that patch on top of the new tar version, and that's just not viable to do in the long term. So we have to move away from pristine-tar as soon as we can.
Like, how much would be the disk space increase? Did you do a comparison of some of the repos, or?
Well, obviously the space increase should be significant, because we no longer store the deltas against the Git trees, but we store the full tarballs. So, yeah, every tarball gets stored somewhere in Git LFS storage, as it is. with no extra compression or delta. So I didn't calculate it, but I expect it to be significant probably, but not significant enough probably to, I mean, this space is relatively cheap compared to what it was even 10 years ago or 20 years ago when, I don't know, when pristine-tar was invented. So I don't think it should be a big problem. On the other hand, of course, if you want to work with all of the tarballs at once locally and you download all of them, then your local Git repository grows to much bigger extent than if you just checked out or cloned the repository with pristine-tar branch. On the third hand, usually probably you don't want to do that. You work with just a couple of versions, so your local repo won't probably grow that much, but as you work with more and more versions, you will gradually accumulate them in the storage. You know, it's like it's a compromise between having things, you know, bit by bit identical, or saving space but not being exactly reliable. I think so.
Is there some cleanup?
Cleanup?
Yeah. Let's say I upgrade a package, which means I download the original source from upstream and put that in pristine-lfs. And this happens several times. So I have the local tarballs, all of them in Git, and I don't need them. So is there any way to clean up the old local copies?
Well, the easy way is you can just if you just want to delete the locally downloaded cache of those objects, you can just drop the whole storage. It's just a deleted directory .git/lfs. It should do it. Probably there's a command in Git LFS to do the same. There is no command directly in pristine-lfs for this. I never thought about it, but maybe it makes sense to ask it to clean up.
Just imagine that my upstream has 100 megabyte source, and they release that each month. And
probably I should add a subcommand to make that automatically happen, like keep the last 5 versions or something. Yeah, good idea. Thank you.
Just an idea, maybe like the archive already has the copies, so instead of storing in the Git LFS, maybe can it have a pointer to the archive or something to save space?
To where, sorry?
The tarballs are already in the archive, so instead of storing again in Salsa, can it have some pointer to the URL or something? I don't know, just...
Well, in theory, Git LFS, so this Git LFS in theory can download files from anywhere. It's just, so the default, by default, the idea is that it talks to the Git repository. So it finds the URL to download the file from the address of the Git repository, adding some extra subpath. But in theory, probably, it could try and download those files from somewhere else, because the files are identified by the SHA-256 hash. If we had a way to download it, I was considering adding support for some sort of maybe snapshots Debian.org or something, but I don't think snapshots Debian.org supports this exact thing. It has other hashes, but I don't think 256. I need to check it, but I had this idea actually, so that if the object is not found, try snapshots Debian.org or something. It could be.
This download the source from the archive thing is implemented in Oric targz in dev scripts. That's one of the things it tries.
Yes, comments or questions? If not, Andrej, thank you so much for such an interesting talk.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.